Y'all know one of our big things, Laura and I's big things are what? Early childhood education and crime and making sure the city's safe. We had, this is opinion, okay, and I'm going to let him set the record straight, but we elected as a city Jason Williams as DA, who ran on one platform, and I think then he realized he had to evolve and make some changes. And Gary Keller tells us that making change needs what? A who. You can have the idea, but you need the person that's going to do it, that's going to make it happen. And when I started saying, like, how did all this change happen? How did the DA's office evolve and come around and start looking at things differently? A name kept coming up. And it was this guy, Andre, who came back to work for the DA's office. And finally, we've got him here today to talk to us. So everybody welcome Andre Gaudin, who's the chief of screening.
All right.
Make sure your microphone's on, please. Just green light. Yep. I can do this on a dude, not a woman. Okay. I would be like,
good to see you.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So, all right, real quick, let's get something out of the way. You're going to be running for judge. You're going to be announcing that soon. So I didn't want anybody to be like, okay, why is he, No, this is private.
It's out there, but I'm here. My official capacity today is
Right.
the chief of screening of the Orleans Parish DA's office, not as a judicial candidate. Yeah.
So we keep seeing crime down. We tell people we're at 1970s crime levels. Everyone here is not only thrilled, but we are trying to tell that story. We want, we have guests like you. Daniel Shanks, who in your office, has been here because I think No Dice was a great idea. Jason's been, we get people to come here so that we get it right from the horse's mouth of exactly what happens so we can get rid of rumors and BS old stories that people have been telling for a long time. So what's happening right now in crime? Kind of, maybe if I said anything wrong up front, you correct me and tell us why you would come back and work in the DA's office when you've done that before.
Well, so that is probably the first correction. I never left. This is the first job I ever had out of law school. I was hired by Leon Canizero, Jason's predecessor. I maintained that employment through the transition, and I have, for 15 years, been a prosecutor for the city of New Orleans, which is a very, very rewarding task, a very Sisyphean task, but a very rewarding one. What's new in crime, or law enforcement, I guess, is really the question, right? I suppose what's new in crime. About 4 years ago, I was made, after transitioning in, I was made chief of screening at the DA's office. And that was after a hard time. We had COVID-19, we had the summer of racial unrest, we had a lot of diminishing returns on being able to get people in the door to be prosecutors. It wasn't a cool job anymore. And so we were in a kind of a skeleton crew kind of state of being.
What is chief of screening? Sorry, I didn't know what that meant.
So chief of screening, the chief of screening role in any big DA's office, there tends to be three big divisions, right? There's screening division, there's the trials division, and there's the appeals division. And they kind of reflect the beginning, the middle, and the end of a case. When somebody gets arrested, right, we, in screening, gather all the police reports, look at all the evidence, look at all the surveillance footage, the body-worn cameras, review everything, talk to witnesses, confirm that they're willing to come in and testify in a year or 6 months, however long it takes. And once we do that, we make an assessment about what, if anything, to charge. And there's two different standards, right? You need probable cause to make an arrest. And that means that it's kind of more probable than not that somebody committed a crime. But to convict a person at a jury trial, you need proof beyond all reasonable doubt, right? And those are two very different standards. One is beyond reasonable doubt is the highest judicial standard that we have. That is the most egregious, highest, for civil court, you just need preponderance, which is just, 51% versus 49%. Probable cause is something a little bit more than that, although not too far off. But beyond a reasonable doubt, you can't quantify it, but it's beyond all reasonable doubt. If you can think of a reasonable excuse or reason or defense for a defendant as a juror, that should be a not guilty verdict.
And the history of that really goes back to the founding of this country, right?
Oh, yeah.
That was a big change. That was a big thing. If you're going to be found criminally guilty, jury of your peers, and beyond and beyond a reasonable doubt.
I mean, it goes even before that to the Robert's Rules and all the things that happened in England, the Star Chambers and all the evolution of laws to protect, I guess, the landed class, the nobles, from an overzealous or over tyrannical king. But we inherited all those laws by virtue of our founding of our great country.
And then whenever we screw up and pull away from it, we end up burning like women alive, and witch trials, things like that. And then we're like, oh, that was a mess.
Right.
Let's go backwards.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Because there's
we figured it out. Let's go back. Oops. Like this whole thing was. We had it right.
Yeah.
We tried this again. Didn't work. We remember. It feels like we're doing that again today. That's why I brought it up.
That's a fair point. But the tyranny of the masses is also tyranny, right? So we have to have a measure of the rule of law bouncing against kind of just blatant democratic will, and that protects our minority rights. It protects our civil liberties. It allows us to be free in this country. And if that's stripped away by just the whimsical decision of the majority, then you don't really have democracy. You just have another form of tyranny. So that's what screening does. And in our DA's office, our screening division, has that same role. We make that call about what to charge, if anything. And then we hand the cases off to the trials division. Those tend to be the young guns who are coming out of law school, with glit in their eye and ready to go and try every tough case they have in front of them. And they take those cases from arraignment all the way through to conviction or plea.
And really, just to if you know anyone that's in law, this is an incredible opportunity to work for the DA's office. Working for the DA's office is incredible because you just get so many cases thrown at you. You see so much more casework, so much more court time than you ever would in private practice, especially at that age. Yeah. And so you take less money out of law school is the idea, so that you get a lot more at-bats, and then you end up setting yourself up for a career as something else.
Absolutely.
But where you can go to trial, and you've got a lot of trial experience.
Absolutely. Tulane and Broad, the Orleans Parish Criminal Court, is unlike any jurisdiction in this entire country. I mean, we have more volume per capita than almost any other place. It is a tough courthouse. It's a tough defense bar. It's a tough bench. We'll put an asterisk on that one. So it's a tough place to go and win a trial. And so you really learn very quickly how to get the steel in your spine and the glint in your eye, or you don't succeed. And then so we have screening, we have trials, and then appeals is kind of the end of the case, right? That's when it goes up. If we get a conviction at trial, they have a right to an appeal that goes all the way up to the Supreme Court until that conviction is affirmed, and then that case is finally closed for all intents and purposes. So when I took over as chief of screening about 4 years ago, we were organized in a kind of traditional way, and that's kind of like a Baskin-Robbins, right? You have 31 flavors of ice cream, and you have specialists in the screening division, like I'm the chocolate specialist, or I'm the Rocky Road specialist, and I just take that one flavor of ice cream, and I'm really good at telling very quickly whether that's good ice cream or bad ice cream, and move on to the next batch, right? And so that's kind of what we had. We had armed robbery specialists, we had economic crime specialists, we had property crime specialists, we had persons crime specialists, we had all these specializations. And there's an advantage to that in that you get good at screening that particular type of case, but what happens is we kind of systematically put on blinders to the patterns of crime that are occurring in the city, the neighborhoods, right? There might be a pattern of auto burglaries in one area that might also be associated with narcotics activity, blighted property, a heroin dealer that's operating at will out of the back of a corner store. All these other things that are happening that actually have the patterns of crime in our neighborhoods, in the streets. And the cops, through their hard efforts, the police force will learn what's going on in that neighborhood, why this particular shooting happened, how it was related to an auto burglar who was fencing goods at an abandoned property. We'll figure that out on a case-by-case basis, but then when it gets to the DA's office, that knowledge, that insight would simply die on the vine, because we would just be looking, it's not an auto burglary? Well, I'm not going to look at anything else. I'm not going to look at how that connects to a shooting. I'm not going to look at how that connects to a blighted property, an abandoned residence. I'm not going to look at any of that stuff. And so I wanted to take those blinders off, and I loved your data presentation earlier, because I'm an economics minor at Tulane undergrad, and I always had that prob and stat kind of glint in my eye as well. And so when it came to looking at the bigger picture, I wanted to use data to drive decision making. I wanted to see those patterns of crime, so we reorganized not by flavor of crime, like Baskin-Robbins style, but by actual jurisdiction. Now, we have in our city 8 police districts, right? 1 through 8, 1st district, 2nd district, etc. We're sitting right now here in the 2nd police district, where I also...
We've had our district commander come say
where
hi.
I also hang my hat. I am over on Plum Street, not too far from the snowball stand.
Nice.
But having that relationship, having that assignment by geographical district was a game changer for us, because all of a sudden we were liaisoning directly with the district commanders, who were, again, getting that hard-earned effort of understanding what was going on in their districts. We're talking to the district detectives. We're talking to the patrolmen and women who are going out every night at 4 a.m. for random calls for service. And we're making that relationship happen. So now that we are active participants in understanding why crime is occurring on one particular block, in one particular neighborhood, in one particular precinct, in one particular district. And that opens up an entire range of tools that our office, the DA's office, had never really used before in trying to actually undercut and resolve some of those underlying issues and prevent future cases from occurring. So, you have a cop going out every single night at 3 a.m. for, drug activity, and there's a bunch of streetlights that are out, and there's a bunch of abandoned cars, there's a bunch of blighted houses, there's a corner store that's operating 24/7, there's a low-income apartment complex that half the units are abandoned, the doors are kicked in. And, the solutions to those problems, only one of them is law enforcement based, right? Every other one of them is a city services based, is philanthropic engagement based, is real estate based. I mean, there's solutions to those problems that would actually reduce the number of call outs for service without having to over-police a neighborhood, without having to send cops out there every single night at 3 a.m. trying to do their best, burnt out, and then making arrests on young men and women who are walking in those streets who maybe have a right to be there. And I'm just saying, if we can line up behind NOPD, and that's what we try to do, line up behind their hard-earned information, their hard-earned knowledge that they got from their investigations, and put the entire bevy of city services to actually resolve some of those issues, we end up with a safer city. And so that public safety aspect, data-driven, was exactly my focus.
I think that's incredible. But why did you have to do it? Why did NOPD not do this? You'd think that this would be like a place that they could go that would make them better at policing. Is it strictly a matter of budget? Is it strictly a matter of manpower? Or is it just, we had the idea, we had a DA that was willing to take a risk, and we went for, and the people to implement it, and that's the story? Or how did that kind of...
So you have to understand the kind of evolution of policing over the course of the last 100 years, and I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but it starts off with professionalization of police forces. That happens in New York and Boston, where all of a sudden there's a regular police force. They have a report writing system where they document their investigation and they preserve it for posterity. That grows into a more refined system where they have patrolmen in police cars with radios, which
change the world.
Obviously blows people's mind because they can be dispatched to locations. And then that grows into what I call cops on dots. And that's where the police begin to look at heat maps. And they say, oh, look, we made a gun arrest here or a drug arrest here. Let's put more cops in that spot and make more arrests. And so it kind of funnels that system. But what happens is you get over-policing of neighborhoods. You get, identification of a minority group that seems to be targeted by police activity, and that creates its own issue because when there's a shooting or there's a murder or there's something where we need witnesses to come forward, they feel victimized by the fact that their son might have gotten jacked up just the week before because there's cops rolling around every single day trying to make another gun or drug arrest. It creates distrust between the police, and so it has a lot of knock-on effects that aren't really conducive to increasing public safety, but are conducive to processing more young men through the jail system. And so when you're really trying to solve those underlying issues, you have to really change the way you think. Police departments are paramilitary organizations. They have a rank, structure, command, accountability, all those things. And it's difficult to move a paramilitary structure in a very tremendous way without something like a war. And of course, police don't go to war, but that's how militaries work. In fact, when you look at the history, if you're a history buff, right, every single new army is designed to win the last war we fought, right?
So creativity is a hard thing.
It's a hard thing.
Going sideways is hard in an up and down.
Now we had Michelle Woodfork as the interim police chief at the time when I was saying, listen, let's use this new tool. This tool that we got from a grant was called risk terrain modeling. And I'd written a grant, there's a bunch of grants for the Bureau of Justice Assistance, which is a Department of Justice kind of funding arm for innovative ideas. And one of them was concerning overdose deaths. And I was looking very closely at overdose deaths for a long time. I was a HIDA prosecutor, kind of a gunslinger, working with all the federal and state joint task force, looking for the most violent, most dangerous individuals, selling the most dangerous drugs. The middle of the fentanyl epidemic, so it was a big issue. But working that kind of joint task force model got me aware of a lot of grant opportunities to fund innovative ideas. And so when we're looking at the COSAP grant opportunity, it said, listen, how do you understand overdose deaths in a more fundamental way using data? And I looked at this tool, and I stole a great idea. As they say, good artists borrow, great artists steal. In Newark, New Jersey, the Newark Police Department, partnering with Rutgers University, had developed an analytical construct called risk terrain modeling. And what that does is it says, look, let's map our entire urban landscape. Let's Let's quantify every burnt out streetlight, every abandoned car, every corner store, every ATM, every gambling machine, every bodega, everything. Let's map the entire city landscape like we would a hill and a dale and a glen and a brook and a river. Let's understand what the terrain looks like. And when we do that, we can run an analytical technique called risk terrain modeling, where we look at the crime maps and we put those dots of where a crime occurred together with what they're occurring nearby. And we try to understand, look, I'm not saying that a corner store causes an armed robbery, but if a corner store is near an area where the streetlights are out, near a low-income housing complex with a bunch of blighted property and a bunch of blighted or abandoned cars in front of it, it seems to be, no surprise, right, that those things have a magnifying effect, and your chances for being robbed after you pull out an ATM from that corner store scream up astronomically. And so when you get the lens of looking through the data approach, which I guess I was appreciative of what you were doing earlier, when you're looking to crime through that data-driven approach, you get insights that allow you to engage with community and understand these problems more fundamentally. And that was the big breakthrough for us. So we wrote that grant. We got access to this tool. Now, we used it for overdose deaths, but I was like, I've got this tool. Yeah. I'm not going to sit on it.
You just gave me a Corvette. Yeah, I'm going to go drive.
Yeah, I'm going to take it out for its money. So we ran some of the other interesting aspects of crime through this tool, and we began to get those insights. And that really is what grew into No Dice. And you've talked to Daniel, who's been my right-hand man on getting No Dice off the ground and really running.
You got him back out of private practice, right?
He was.
I was right on that. Yeah, so you pulled, the fact that you took over screening pulled some people back in the office when y'all badly needed people. And then you were interested in getting money from DC. I think that's fabulous. That is, like, it drives me nuts that there's all these grants in DC and we just have people that don't have the curiosity to go do it. So thank you for having that curiosity and scratching that itch. And then you get this awesome piece of software.
That's right. And so it really changed the way that we can engage with community, engage with groups like this, and understanding the problems of crime. And it's been a real change. So Michelle Woodfork brought into it enthusiastically when she was interim police chief. I presented the idea first to my boss. I said, listen, I got this idea for how we can go sell something to NOPD, to this analytical concept, which we formed it in No Dice.
Because you're not a police force.
I'm
you
not.
Still need to work with NOPD to go do the enforcement, and actually you can give them all the data, but they don't have to do a thing.
100%. And I can't walk into a room full of, again, people who put their lives on the line wearing bulletproof vests on every night and say, listen, let me tell you how to do your job from my ivory tower over at 619 South White. That's not going to work.
And I think that sounds kind of silly and simple, but we forget that people NOPD and the DA's office, my understanding is, weren't meeting on cases regularly. Y'all, NOPD is arresting people. You all are trying to prosecute them, and there's no regular meeting to get handoffs of data or information or reports. You're just getting a computer report over, and you got to figure it out based on what's in a file. And oftentimes, you needed more information. They were understaffed, so they weren't able to resource that file properly. I mean, they have excuses too. And there was also a lack of trust and finger pointing because citizens were frankly just tired of being carjacked and all these things and just screaming at whoever WDSU told us to scream at, right? Which is often wrong. Yeah. So you had to rebuild that trust.
Yeah, we did. And I was, when the DA was kind of, there's some quarreling back and forth with then Police Chief Sean Ferguson, and then with the Metropolitan Crime Committee, Ralph Goyeneche, and I was unabashed in saying, look, we need to embrace these critics. We need to embrace these enemies, so to speak, of the DA's office and make them part of our solution, because if we are quarreling with them, right, the fallout is not any kind of like, oh, well, the DA's office was right. It's a disservice to the people who live in the city, me included, right? And the 2nd District over on Plum, that I might have my kids be more in danger from the public safety failures of a police department and a DA's office that are not in cahoots, being a significant problem for me. So when we took that approach, when we took the RTM to them, we didn't approach it as, look, let me tell you what to do. We took it as, look, we want to back up your gains. We want to back up your understanding. We want to back up your investigations with every resource outside of my office, that the city has, right? It's code enforcement or public safety, fixing streetlights, towing cars, remediating blight. Whatever we can do, we want to bring them into the game and support your hard-earned gains, because that was what we wanted to pitch it as. And frankly, that's what we're doing. I'm not a law enforcement agent. I cannot arrest anybody. You'll never see me with a gun on my hip and with a flashlight on the top of my car.
Do you get a blue light?
No, nothing. I'm just a lawyer. So my tools are pens and paper and advocacy with my voice, and that's all I got. But if we sell that, if we went to them and said, listen, we want to back you up, We want to back up your gains. We want to back up your hard-earned knowledge. It was a much different sale, and we made that. And so then Michelle was on board. Like, look, that sounds great. Let's get the backup we need. And when Ann took over after Michelle Woodfork left the office, Ann was also enthusiastic about it because she in Oakland had been using a place-based approach, trying to figure out where those problem areas were and come up with creative solutions that resolve the underlying issues, not just put more boots on the ground, put more boots on the ground, put more boots on the ground. So it's been a success. It became such a big success that I needed a full-time guy dedicated it. So Daniel Shanks, who was one of my district screeners, just handling one district, we got to create a spot for him to be just the no dice guy. He's a director of strategic initiatives, and he does that. He breathes that Monday through Friday.
He's been here and presented his map and showed us how they shut down the tire. Explained how they shut down the tire shop on on Claiborne, and then the London Lodge, and I think there's been a few since.
Yeah. It was a tool. That was the other fun part, was getting that tool back in place. When I was the HIDTA case advocate for about 4 or 5 years, and I was just doing big-time gang cases, big-time drugs and guns cases. Using asset forfeiture was a big tool that we had, because you'd have these, organizations that were sometimes nebulous, but they'd have lots of stuff. They'd have lots of cash. They'd have lots of cars. They'd have lots of houses. Right. That they were all paid for with ill-begotten gains, and they couldn't show how they'd gotten those things, but for the fact that they were, drug dealers or armed robbers. And so we could seize those assets, and that was sometimes the best, most effective punishment that we could get on some of these individuals, where they had all split and left all the stuff behind because they wanted to escape justice, but we could take away their toys. And that was an effective tool that we sometimes had at our use. So whenever it came to no dice, it was a no-brainer. Look, I've got these great asset seizure laws. Let's go grab their stuff.
Yeah. All right. I'm the one that's maybe a little tougher, and you can, if you need a pass. But one of the big decisions, Governor Landrieu comes in, and there was a famous press conference, I think, on the floor of the Superdome, and it's Jeff Landry, Liz Murrell, Jason Williams, and others. And D.A. Williams made a deal that said, if y'all bring in state trooper support, Troop NOLA, we will let the state AG prosecute any arrests that happen by Troop NOLA, which the way it's supposed to go is the Orleans Parish DA, the DA of that jurisdiction, is supposed to get that no matter who arrests them, unless it's federal, right? So, because you're acting on behalf of the state. When you go to court, the state of Louisiana says, blah, 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 you're an agent of the state. At that time, I think it's a great idea. It was a great idea. I think it was incredible for Jason to step back and release that. I don't think that had ever been done many places in the country. We're in a different phase, though, now, it feels like. Is that still the right thing? Does that have a sunset on it? Do we lose Troop NOLA if we lose that? I mean, at some point, I think the city of New Orleans needs to be the city of New Orleans again and police itself. And they're kind of coming after us from the financial stuff, and we have a new mayor. No matter what side you're on, we have a new mayor and people that want to go at this differently. I don't know. Where do you see this?
Yeah, you raise up some, I think, fascinating and very interesting questions about our democracy. There's two things. One, when Jason had to make the call about whether or not to take that bargain, we'll have Troop NOLA, we'll have more police on the streets, but you're going to lose your mandate from the Orleans Parish to be the one who exercises their prosecutorial discretion in who or what to charge. And so that's a diminishment, frankly, of the democratic representation of the city of New Orleans. And we have also the increase of public safety that having more police officers on the street would entail for the people of New Orleans. And so as the DA, he had to make a call.
Yeah, and to be clear, I think it was courageous and the right call.
At the time, we were struggling quite badly to re-man up and re-woman up the police force. NOPD was at a historic low, and we simply had not enough police officers for too much territory. 911 call response times were outlandishly long, and our ability to actually perform that basic police function as a police force was substantially in question. And so he made that bargain because he had to make the call between public safety, right, and his democratic mandate, and he made it for public safety for the people of New Orleans. You raised an interesting question, though, about the other attacks on the democratic representation of the people of New Orleans in their own affairs. And you're absolutely right. There was a resounding defeat of the effort by Baton Rouge to create additional specialty courts. And the concern that we had as an office, and I think the DA had as an elected official, was that if they have the ability to run off specialty courts, and it's possible, right, that Baton Rouge could create a specialty court system and remove all these LSP AG cases to that specialty court when an appointed judge from Baton Rouge comes down, and all of a sudden you have an AG who has no democratic representation from the people of New Orleans except in our statewide elections, which Orleans Parish is not going to control. You're going to have a court-appointed judge from Baton Rouge, which Orleans Parish voters have no ability to control, and that discretion is going to be exercised by an elected state official, AG, whose only one small sliver is represented by Orleans Parish, so to speak. And so that was a significant diminishment, right, of our democratic process. And the ultimate decision was made resoundingly by the voters to reject those specialty courts. And I think that was a wonderful result that really, sometimes I see democratic results and I'm like, whew, how do we do this? Why? But this was one where I felt reinvigorated by the democratic process because people saw it, called BS on it, and rejected it. The other part is that you have the mayor-elect right now being offered a Faustian bargain to have more or less put the city in receivership to resolve this financial crisis. And she's also, thankfully, and the council have all rejected this as a concept. We're not going to allow the city of New Orleans to lose its democratic representation and more or less be taken over by bureaucrats and elected officials from statewide Baton Rouge offices. We want to maintain that control. And I think that the mayor-elect, has been able to garner a lot of trust in the halls of the Capitol by being who she is, by having the experience she has, and by saying, look, we're going to make sure that this is transparent, there's accountability, but we're not giving you the keys to the Camaro, so to speak, and letting you run our city rampant. So all those things are good things, and I think that there is a bulwark against further encroachment, but I think that the DA had to make a tough call. I think he made the right call. Troop NOLA has been phenomenal. I've worked as the HIDTA case advocate. I worked hand in glove with the LSP HIDTA team, and they are phenomenal detectives, phenomenal law enforcement officers. This guy, Troy Pichon, I'm not sure if he'll hear this through the grapevine, but Trooper Troy Pichon is one of the members of Troop NOLA. He is one of the best police officers I've ever worked with. I mean, he's the action hero cop who's thoughtful, who's invigorating. He literally chased down a guy at the intersection of Plum and Burdette. The NOPD had chased a carjacker, I think, or an armed robber from one side of the city to the other. He interceded, ran the guy into a light pole, made the arrest right there, and the captain of Troop NOLA, Captain High, was right behind him. It happened in my front yard. I was like, kids, go back inside, but this is amazing.
Captain Hyatt, who I've gotten to talk to many times, and we should probably get here, but this guy's writing his thesis right now.
He's incredible.
These aren't guys that are just out there to bang people's heads up against concrete walls you heard terrible stories of cops back in the day. These guys are actually super smart. The governor said you can wreck as many Yukons or Tahoes as you want as long as you catch them. Yeah. And we'll keep buying them. Yeah. And the NOPD can't do that. They'd be out of cars in a minute. Yeah. And it would take forever to get it. So
we're very fortunate. And I would say that LSP as an organization, what's interesting, I think, in the long term that you might want to have an angle on as you kind of continue this series is right now, I think an entire LSP, which used to be predominantly a traffic organization, they had the crime lab, but they were, the troopers on the highway.
Tight pants and motorcycles.
Absolutely.
And boots.
Absolutely. But now the assignment to have, if you're in the LSP, and I got to imagine in 5 years, 10 years, the new commander of the LSP will be somebody who came out of Troop NOLA, who cut their teeth doing law enforcement efforts here in New Orleans. This is the best assignment in all of LSP.
That's kind of
right here in New Orleans. And so when you think about what the long-term effects are for the LSP as a statewide organization, I mean, I think there's an aspect that, like most things in New Orleans, eventually we're going to get that gumbo into your blood, and it's going to be taken over. So I think slowly but surely,
constitutionally and all this. And
the long run, we're going to win LSP. We're going to have LSP commanders who are New Orleans friendly, who are New Orleans understanding, and who want to make New Orleans a safer place. So there is an aspect of that that's hard to quantify, but it's absolutely an undercurrent of what's going on.
Last question I have for you is about victims advocacy. I think y'all have done a lot for that as well. It never feels like enough, I'm sure, for people who are victims of crime. We have 2 people in our office who have been victims of pretty significant violent crime and are alive and here and around. But y'all put a text messaging system in, so if somebody has a trial that was the victim, the perpetrator has a trial and gets off or is released or doesn't show up, you all text message that out. right?
Mm-hmm.
You put that system in. Tell us about some of the other victim advocacy things y'all are doing, because I don't think those get any play. And we could use more, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a question of resources and time and the ability to really meet every single victim where they are. I would say that we have done a good job, right, with the classic, armed robbery victim or the next of kin on a murder case. Our sex crimes units are specialized and vertical now. They do a lot of quick outreach with those victims of sex crimes, and they're special victims for a reason. They need a lot of help, and every way we can help them in this state of crisis, we try to help them and meet them where they are. But I think the biggest thing, and this is, again, kind of from a statistics standpoint, is that, when you look at NOPD from altitude, 40,000 feet, and you look down at NOPD, it is a domestic violence response unit with a couple of boutique homicide and sex crimes units thrown in. Mm-hmm. And I say that because the domestic violence issues in our city are outsized. In most cities, I don't think that we stand particularly high above the shoulders of our peers, but domestic violence is a pervasive and completely hard to quantify problem because it's happening in bedrooms, it's happening in kitchens, it's happening in
behind closed doors.
Yeah, in living rooms, and it's not subject to surveillance cameras, it's not subject to body-worn cameras, there's not a lot of third parties who are coming forward to talk about this, and these victims need the most help we can give them, and they're often in a state of crisis because the person who just punched them in the face or choked them, right, is also the person that helps pick up the kids or the person who helps pay the mortgage or the person who helps pay the electric bills. And so they are in an absolute state of crisis when this happens. They've picked up the phone. They've interceded the state in their personal affairs because it's become violent. They've reached out for help, and now they are literally in crisis. And the problem is it's hard to find the resources sufficient to meet that demand and the needs that they have because there are so many domestic violence incidents happening on a daily, on a nightly basis. Like I said, you think about NOPD and what NOPD does, they mostly just respond to DV incidents. Right, that's the majority of their work. And it's hard to think about it that way when we worry about carjackings and murders and shootings and all these things. But it's domestic violence is the bread and butter of a day-to-day case file. And so these victims, we're doing a lot. We're working with the New Orleans Department of Health. Dr. Avegno and her team are doing amazing things to really ramp up what's called NOPD Project AIR, which is reaching them out to these victims post-incident as quickly as possible to get them services, to help them with counseling, to help them with support and financial support if needed. And that's really where I think the next big, I don't want to say frontier, but where we really need to, as a city, coalesce and push those services through. Because the issue is that these domestic violence victims, they're not the only victim, right? There's kids in a lot of these houses who are watching domestic violence, who are watching violence and conflict resolution being taught at the point of a fist. And that is a significant problem because I end up prosecuting those kids for murders and for robberies and for violence 5-10 years later because that was what they grew up as the norm. And that's a horrible problem because, I'm putting a guy in jail who's absolutely guilty of a murder, right? And he deserves to go in jail. He's taken a life, and the extreme penalty of life without parole is the appropriate penalty. But the fact that that kid grew up in a home terrorized by domestic violence, watching his dad or his dad's boy or his mom's boyfriend beat up his mom on a regular basis, and maybe him too, and having to realize that that's the only way that I can communicate with the world, like an Edward Scissorhands kind of joke. I only have scissor hands. What am I going to do with these scissor hands? Well, I'm going to cut things, right? And it's a stupid joke, but it makes the reality of what we have in our city with domestic violence, how paramount it is to really find a way to get support for these victims, support for these victims' children, as a really leading, cutting-edge thing of what we can do with victim engagement. So I'm working on that problem on my way out the door, but I'm hoping that we can make some inroads on that too, because it's absolutely vital for long-term crime reduction that we get those domestic violence numbers down, because it will have payout 5 years from now, 10 years from now when those kids grow up.
Mm-hmm. Any questions? We hit a lot of topics. Okay. Go ahead, Cindy. I took it all along. He knows a couple things.
Is New Orleans higher in domestic violence than are our stats just off the rail, or is it like a national problem?
It's a national problem.
Okay, so we're not...
Well, there is a correlation, right, between financial crisis and domestic violence. They tend to coalesce, right? There also tends to be, on payday, if the paycheck has to come through, there is a spike in domestic violence. On holidays when people are together in homes, there's a spike in domestic violence. And so all these things come together to create our issues. We have an outsized poverty problem, which also creates financial pressures, which also puts an impetus on more domestic violence because of that correlation. So our city as a city is not particularly outsized, but our city as a function of our persistent poverty problem has a significant problem.
Okay.
Because that's a problem for our city. And that's economic opportunity, that's
Right.
economic growth, that's driving
It's
housing
holistic.
prices and home ownership and multi-generational
Yeah, it's
wealth.
everything.
It's holistic. It's
Right.
like the whole thing. Yeah. Okay.
Anybody else?
I
Lauren?
have a question. Thank you so much for sharing what you do, and it really makes me feel good to know that you're such a thoughtful person in this role at the Chief of Screening, and have such a passion for the rule of law. That's amazing. My question is, you have such a mind for policy. Why is it that you, in the next chapter, think that being a judge is, the route you want to go?
Yeah. Good question. I think I can talk in general terms without crossing any lines.
The issue is he's on payroll right now of the taxpayers and cannot be.
Yeah.
No,
going
not
any
as a
further than
campaign,
election.
but
about the judicial
in terms of
policies,
the
yeah.
impact.
I'm just trying to explain why
How is that
we've
a
got an issue.
continuation of the impact that
Yeah.
you're?
So, as a prosecutor, right, you want to come in and have a level playing field to present your case, and you want to have somebody who's not putting their thumb on a scale or not, based upon their mood, changing wildly whether or not you're able to work out a plea deal that you come to a defense, and you want somebody who's not putting their own political views about what the law should be or shouldn't be into what should be a black letter area of law. That we read the book, we read the code says X. If there's violation of X, then Y is the consequence, right? And so when we see that we're running up against a bulwark of that as an issue, we can't just sit by and let more. Can't be critical here. What we don't want is to have a system where the DA's office and even the defense attorneys are coming together to make good resolutions, to make effective resolutions that break the cycle of crime, that put the victim back in their place where they should have been before this happened, that do all these things, and then we also have to challenge a judiciary that might not be willing to accept those resolutions. And so that is extremely frustrating as a chief of screening, as a chief of trials, as DA's office, to have to deal with those issues. So again, I'm not being critical of any particular judge, and I don't want to.
No, I mean, look, there's been,
but that's its own issue, and it's an important. Judicial elections matter for a reason, right? Because there's a lot of control over criminal justice from the bench, and we have to be partners with that solution, and have a criminal court system, a criminal justice system that doesn't look away from these hard issues, it doesn't shy away from these hard facts, and makes good and sound outcomes that interrupt that cycle of crime or preserve public safety by locking up a guy and throwing away the key. And there's a big range, right? It's a big pile of gray that has to be sorted out. And we need good people on all sides, on defense attorney side, on the DA's office side, and up on the bench, calling balls and strikes as they should be called and not based upon mood or whim or political view. So it's an important part of what we do. And if we don't put good people on the bench, eventually we're all going to suffer as a city, and public safety will diminish. So that's an important reason why everyone should vote in judicial elections. I'm not talking about anyone in particular, but all judicial elections are important. And I think we have a lot of apathy in general. I know we have a lot of apathy because the voter turnout for judicial elections is as low as it possibly can be.
As a voter, though, it's not always apathy. We just don't know.
You're right.
Well,
It's so
right.
great that you're here.
So
I'll be a big-
We're
like, who do we vote for?
This
We
is
don't
so.
know.
I think this is becoming the next thing, right? We get a lot of exposure in TV as to who a good executive is going to be in that branch. We even,
More information on the other.
the judicial
election.
branch is a hard one, and you know what the hardest one is? The case with minors, because that court, everything is sealed. You don't get a lot of results, and we've got some of the. I'll say this, not you. We have some of the worst things coming out of juvenile court, and I don't mean worse that like not protecting citizens. I mean we're not protecting the children that are going through it. We're not protecting. We're not making good, sound decisions, and it's a big problem. It's kind of the last frontier. It's why Rafi and the MCC has really shifted its focus now. They feel like we've like if you think about it like a pipeline, like we've got arrests, we've got cases being prosecuted, the DA's office. Now we got to get the judges to do their part. Yeah. And I think that, the seat that is open that's allowing is from someone that the MCC just did a view of who's taking forever to try cases, and it turned out one of the judges basically decided to retire without retiring. And now he's decided, since that MCC report came out, that he's going to retire.
Yeah.
So there's an open seat. So anyway,
Can I
yeah,
say one
maybe
more thing?
maybe
Yeah.
you
Let me-
don't want to get you in trouble.
No, I think I can handle this one cleanly. By analogy, one of the things that I always had frustration with when I was coming up as a young prosecutor was that Leon Canizero, my boss, and Grayman Martin, the first assistant, would go to city council on a regular basis and eventually do battle against Jason Williams and the city council over the numbers, over how many cases, how many convictions, how many rates. And it was always a bit of a black box to me internally how the DA's office got these numbers. And I'm not disparaging them or their techniques, but it wasn't transparent. It wasn't something that the average voter could go on a website and go, let me see what's actually going on here.
Yeah.
And so whenever I've written several grants for the office, but the other one I wrote was to bring a database administrator and a data analyst into employment at the DA's office. Which
That's Holly,
I
right?
think, Holly is with our OSINT team, and
Okay.
she does the open source
Freedom.
intelligence. Yeah. But that idea to have transparency so that the voters can actually participate in the process and understand how the sausage is being made at Tulane and Broad was a big draw for me. You heard me talk about democracy. I'm kind of a walk on that issue.
Yeah.
So if you actually go to the Orleans Parish DA's office, you can view our data dashboards. You can see an open source, our screening rates, our screening acceptance rates, our conviction rates, all these kind of things. You can filter them by crime. This is all open source now. And I know it's a lot for the average voter to say, look, you've got to go and do a data analysis. But when you have groups like MCC, Raphael Goinechi, having access to our data freely and openly, right, that it's brought out into the light through the democratic process to be able to engage with this material, you change the way that we can participate in our democracy.
Yeah.
And I think, again, I'm not campaigning here, but if that same approach was taken at Tulane and Broad, I think we'd have better engagement with the voters on this delicate issue. What's actually happening? How much is the taxpayer paying to incarcerate this young man for 20 years, and are we getting a good return on that investment? Mm-hmm. Is that an effective increase in public safety? Could we have done it for 5 years and gotten the same return? Should we have done it for 25 and gotten a more return? I don't know the answer to that, but data, right? Data can bear out those questions, and it should. We deserve to have that data. We deserve as voters to engage with this material, to engage with the black box of criminal justice, whether it's juvenile court or whether it's Tulane and Broad. We should have that information at our fingertips, and we should be able to vote on that data. And that's something I think that would be a very effective tool for us to have that understanding.
So it sounds like we're heading in that direction where we'll have, you have the data.
God willing. Well,
MCC,
let's let Andre go, but thank you so much for being here.
Thank
We
you
really
so
appreciate
much.
this. Learned a lot. Thank you. All right, we got to continue on with our meeting. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
What was it? Somebody did a study nationally. It was like if the verdict comes out after lunch, the judge is more likely to find you guilty or something like that because they're tired and just want it over with. There was something, but literally there's been data projects that find crazy outcomes like that.